on our online camp this year. Today we will be speaking about food sovereignty, and we will be speaking with Irina Castro, that is a PhD student in governance, knowledge and innovation from the Center of Social Studies, University of Coimbra, and she's also a member of Toupeiras Vermelhas in Portugal and from the European Network of Scientists for Social and Environmental Responsibility. We will also be speaking with Martina, who is a researcher and activist of an Italian network, Fuori Mercato, Out of Market. We will be speaking with Jem, that's a land rights activist and agrarian reform. And we will also be speaking with Elise Botelho, environmental manager, activist of the popular and eco-socialist movement. So we will be starting with a brief introduction from each one of the speakers. They will speak for 15 minutes. And in regards of the technical part, you can find translation in the interpretation button. And there's only 2 exceptions. If you want to listen to Italian, you have to go to the Chinese button. And if you want to listen to Danish, you have to go to the Japanese button. And we will be starting with Irina Castro. Hi, Irina. Welcome, and thanks for accepting our invitation. And we're starting with you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for the invitation. As Andrea just told, I'm Portuguese. I'm a member of Toupeiras Vermelhas. I'm doing my PhD on GMOs, and I have been particularly following the debate regarding food sovereignty within this pandemic situation. And this is how I would like to approach the subject. I would like to start with a sentence that Greenpeace just have been advocated in the last few months. That is that the food system was
empezar explicando que el sistema alimentario estaba ya roto antes de que llegara el coronavirus. La crisis actual ha mostrado las líneas
de food crisis and food security issues. We can, of course, search for many explanation theories regarding the origins of coronaviruses, but if you look at the most of the critical and to the hard science, you will see that is inevitably we would leads us to the same hotspot.
Sorry, Irina, there's a problem with the Castilian translation, and I think.
Do you want me to go slow?
A comrade was asking for you to go slow if you can, but also we have a problem with the Castilian translation, which I think the.
Do you want me to do it both? To say both sentences? Because I have a written. I can.
Just wait. No, just wait.
Just wait a minute, please.
Okay.
So, Luis, you saying?
So the comrades in the chat are saying that maybe the channels are indifferent because the Denmark account said, okay, Victor says the Castilian is okay now. So we are good.
Okay, so should I start?
Perfect. Please try.
Okay, thank you. So let's go again. So I would like to start with a sentence that has been put forward by Greenpeace. And the sentence is, or the idea is that our food system was broken long before it came along. The reality is that our current crisis has exposed the fault lines and has renewed the urgency to tackle root causes, but it doesn't mean this is a novelty for our discussion. We can search for many explanation theories regarding the emergence of coronavirus, but if we look at the hard science, and we will see that inevitably everything points to the same hotspot, that is the agricultural business. And as like for many decades, Marxist biologists such as Richard Levins, Richard Lewontin, and more recently, Rob Wallace, among others, have alerted us for the emergence of diseases based on our globalized form of agriculture production. We don't even need to refer to a pathogenic such as COVID or influenza to understand what Wallace says when he refers to farming pathogens. For a long time, our agricultural fields have been endemic with all types of plagues and all types of pathogens. And this is based on our industrial farming models that have been promoted and led by global international capital that has, of course, foster endemic appearances of new pathogens and new plagues. For example, plagues such as the ones that come from the genus Ostrinia, who are present in all types of maize all around the world, have become endemic to all types of crops production within a monoculture system and pesticide-based agrobusiness model. So agrobusiness is a system of production that has organized a practice that invites pandemics to our pandemics. It is not agriculture to say, it is not agriculture per se, or some abstract humanity that has provoked the virus to mutate or the virus to appear, nor it is some neutral we that has asked for more market supplies of wild food animals, as is being the case, or the justification that has been provided for in a few countries. Both a plague and a pandemic are global events that worsen the existing social, environmental, and food injustice and aggravates the most vulnerable, such as the elderly, the low income, the poorly nourished, the non-white, people living in war zones, etc. So, and even if you do not want to believe in situated narratives, such as the ones that I hope we're going to listen from our comrades from Brazil and from Philippines and from other places in the world, you can try to look at the research that has been related to agrarian change in the last few decades, has repeatedly shown that the prevailing system of food production, this agrobusiness, is essentially an insecure structure, dependency on conventional industrial markets that is more and more centralized and under the control of capital interests and not on the interests of small food farmers, autonomy in indigenous communities, or people, to say. So we can look at the ways, for how companies such as Smithfield Foods, Tyson, and mostly some of them are mostly North American-based capital. Imposed models of production organization that are basically extracting from our ecosystems and from human labor, farming pathogens, farming new plagues, and also controlling in alliance with Big Pharma the markets for health and food and of research. When we look at Europe and how the bio-based industries joint understanding, as we normally refer to it, has received most of the European state funding efforts to develop a bioeconomy narrative that threatens the climate and biodiversity, we can see how these capital-based companies, international, and that mostly act offshore, act on the interest of their profit and not in the interest of production, of safety, and of health. And this is not me saying, this is the research conducted by several independent organizations, such as the most recent report, the Corporate European Observatory. So, to the matter of our debate in here, what does this has to say about sovereignty? I would like to ensure you that it is not to reinforce any nationalist narrative. The idea of any, our idea of, my idea of, see?
Could you just speak slower? Because a lot of interpreters are lost. Like, with more pauses.
Okay.
Okay.
So, where should I start from, Andrea?
Eu não tenho a certeza porque não sei onde é que eles se perderam, mas se calhar começar a partir de agora só tipo mais devagar.
Okay, so to summarize, based on the fact that we have today an agribusiness model that has been lobbied by a handful of capitalist corporations that have been imposed among several countries, a form of agriculture and animal production that doesn't answer to the needs of the people, of feeding the people, but the needs of their profit. I would like to, and how this has been contributing for the emergency of plagues within the system, but also of pandemics that have been affecting our lives, as we see from COVID. My question, and the question that I like to pose here, is how they are important to understand the concept of sovereignty. What I would like to reinforce is that this idea of sovereignty is not a nationalist narrative. Okay, so this is not about the nation we are in, although I understand that in some contexts it can be connected with it, but this is not about any self-identification, any self-identity or any self-identity. We should not forget that most of the techno-scientific organisms created or that are used today were created within the fascist regimes of Europe. Mussolini, Salazar, and Hitler mass mobilized corn engineered to take advantage of chemical fertilizers, potato resistant to late blight, and pigs that thrive on national production. So we should take into consideration that most of the GM and environmental and food engineering and food technologies that we have today actually were developed and came based on an ideology that was fascist. So that was promoted by the fascist regimes is not the same as food sovereignty. Food independence was in fact the project of the fascist state in Europe. Narratives have been captured by this internationalized global capital. The fascist regimes have provided, in fact, big corporations with the arguments and the institutionalized environment for the progressive market expansion of agrobusiness. And this is important to have in mind because they are not unconnected. We never disconnected from these heritage. So for this reason, when we talk about sovereignty, we must understand lead from a left-wing perspective based on a community organization of production. And this is how it must be put forward. It must be put forward by people farming the lands, by people working the lands, and not by the state. And this must be not just based on this must be put forward not just on a base or an argument that we need to respect local autonomies, foster local and small farm economies, but also because these local autonomies and these local and small farm economies are the ones that are providing the units for biodiversity conservation in practice. So this is not about how you do any type of conservation based on the actual model of conservation, which anchors its strategy on big fridges in Norway or in Switzerland. But conservation, and the conservation that can answer to climate change and to all the forthcoming pandemics and plagues, has to be the one where biodiversity is conservated with Another point that I would like to highlight here in this hour for our debate is that plagues and pandemics are not just a problem of food production. So it's also about food distribution and food consumption. When Rob Wallace says, when we make pigs fly, it's not just about how we are producing, it's how we are of this vertical model of decision in regard to production, how we are distributing the neoliberal model of consumption. A key concept to shift this paradigm is again food sovereignty and the right of communities. But this is not a nationalistic view. This is based on the rights of community and work the land. In this context, and particularly in the context of these pandemics, we need to take the opportunity to implement this normative principle based on the recognition of the access to land, of water, seeds, and other natural resources is an increasing challenge for everyone in rural areas who should be supported in their efforts to promote and undertake sustainable practices of agricultural production and biodiversity conservation about. And I believe that this is one of we have an opportunity at the left to start this debate about how is health connect with food and food is connected with health, and how for so long and for so many years our capacity to make decisions regarding of what we eat, how we produce, and what we want to do with this have been kidnapped by states that only answer to big corporation interests and not to the people's interests. So I would probably stay here and give an opportunity to the other comrades to give their perspective, because I think we're going to have more localized, situated contributions that are mostly more enriched in their capacity to give a practical view of what I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irina. We will now hear from Jem about her experience.
Hello, everyone. Good day. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. So, Irina, for a beautiful, wholesome discussion about the context of food sovereignty. And I would like to note a few things, mainly the context of food sovereignty here in Mindanao, of course. Second would be the implication of rice tariffication law, just very short and concise. Third point would be the farmers' situation in the middle of COVID-19 and the context of the just recently signed anti-terrorism law. So I would like to begin discussing the efforts that have been made here in the Philippines, particularly here in Mindanao, in promoting food sovereignty. So basically, we began building something here in Mindanao that mainly promotes food sovereignty for the past decade. I can't just say the organization here. So basically, it's a result of a realization highlighting access to land. It should have been the first thing to be considered in a small farmer, especially in our context here, wherein most of the lands are still owned by big families or big corporations, or are still even part of an ancestral domain for the indigenous peoples, even the members of the Bangsamoro, that are grabbed through the discrepancies and overlapping of a loss in the land. So whether they own the land or the tenants or their tenants, as long as they have the right to cultivate it accordingly, then that is we believe that that is a strong foundation of food sovereignty, and that a small farmer is sovereign enough to decide. So it basically, aside from building a critical mass, we also raise the consciousness about their rights, their basic rights, especially in as a farmer. It's equally important also to build alliances and lobby to hold the authority in the government. So, okay, we'll move on to the implication of rice liberalization law. So that was signed last year. This is a big step on liberalizing rice importation here in the Philippines, because I think some of you here already know about limit on importation of rice, specifically just to control the influx of rice here in our country. So basically, that is our staple food. Yes. So this law allowed tons and tons of rice to enter the country, which resulted to a very low price of rice, which obviously hit the local farmers who had to raise their prices as well, because government does not really subsidize the agriculture industry. So compared to other countries like in Vietnam and other Asian countries, the government is supporting their farmers, but here we do not. So the local farmers has to need to break even at least. So if we compare it to other countries, the other countries' rice price are very low, even if we put tariff on it. So basically, it resulted to at least 200,000 farmers stopped planting rice since last year, and it's connected to the ongoing pandemic, because after Vietnam said that they will stop importing rice in the Philippines, it has become a threat to us as well. After the farmers said that they will stop farming, but at least they went back. Vietnam went back importing rice, but it's not actually a good idea as well, because we were trying to become self-sufficient in our rice rice production. So it's not only rice; it's also the production of other livestock, which the government itself is trying to control, like asking the farmers to lessen the produce so that imports will have space to come in. So it's ridiculous at the same time, but it is their way to liberalize the market here in our country. So the fourth thing would be the threat of anti-terrorism law in the Philippines. It's not new, because we do have a law that actually controls the terrorism, or shall we say, protect the citizens for terrorist attacks or terrorist threats. But the government is trying to they have a different agenda, which is mainly to control a pricing, which is a big threat right now, because as we can see, the government here is not doing well with the controlling the pandemic, and some farmers end up having their deficit with their produce. Some of the produce end up rotting. Others didn't receive their subsidies that are supposedly be given. So there are all those kinds of threats that can be that can cause a pricing could be. So I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. I was a bit lost about. So the government is trying to put up this law in order to control the masses, not to build a pricing towards the government. And so what is the main connection for our social movement here is that we are no longer allowed to even talk to ourselves, talk about land rights claiming, mainly because the government is antagonizing the people who are trying to criticize the government itself. So it's hard, even for the small farmers, especially, to voice themselves, especially for us who are just trying to be their voice, to be their representatives towards the government agencies, to claim the rights, because then we are being antagonized by the government. So it's one of the biggest challenge at the moment, because even civil societies, simple civil society organizations are being antagonized already. So we call it red tagging. So that's one of the reasons as well that I am not showing any video aside from getting tensed. But yes, that's the main reason. What else if I forget about? So so far that's those are the things that I have to mention, but maybe I can come back later if I forget something. So far I have to say in a very short period, hopefully. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jem. We will now listen from Martina.
Okay. Ciao a tutte e tutti, io sono Martina di Fuori Mercato. Intanto ringrazio Irina e Jem per gli importanti stimoli alla discussione che già hanno posto.
Contribution to discussion.
Come è stato già detto,
I would say that has been said. I think
Just wait a second.
It's important to recognize the interdependence. Can you hear me? Okay.
Putz, acho que eu tenho que mudar aqui. Peraí, agora é Chinese. Muda aqui para chinês. Olá, eu ainda...
So, translators, interpreters, could you please try to speak again?
So if I speak here in English channel, you would hear me? I thank Irina and Jem for the stimulus and contributions they gave to the discussion, and as it's been said from them, from previous intervention, it is important to recognize independence as a principle, as a key principle to the functioning for the planet Earth and ecological systems. And it's important to do this, to reiterate this in this COVID-19 crisis, when energy issues, social inequalities, social and environmental insecurities, there are elements of critical criticity in the system nowadays. I'll start a little bit with issues that have emerged and dominated public debate in Italy during these months of the health crisis, and in particular way, they dominated the lockdown phase. This one is interested in the daily life of many people for more than 2 months, and much less those people who had been forced to work in production activities defined as essential by the government.
Excuse me. We need to stop again. First of all, when your interpretation from mute original language, because else you still hear the speaker beside it. I think that's the problem from the English channel, which will mean for Pauline translating from English to French, and from the Danes translating from English to Danish. Push unmute, mute original language, that we don't hear Martina in the background. That could be one of them. Then we have the question about the Castilian. Alex. Looks like that's broken.
Okay.
Restart, sorry.
Okay, let's try again. It is important nowadays to recognize interdependence as a key operating principle of the ecological systems and therefore of planet Earth. And it's important to do this today in this COVID-19 crisis, when energy issues, social inequalities, environmental insecurities, scarcity of sources are all critical elements of the system today as they were before. I'll start with some cues that have emerged and dominated the public debate in Italy during these months of the health crisis. And in particular, they dominated the lockdown phase. This lockdown phase has interested the daily life of many people for more than 2 months, but much less those people who have been forced to work in production activities defined as essential by the government. This phase has came to an end for the moment in May. During these months, some elements emerged in the debate, strongly connected with the access to food. The first one is the centrality of food and its interdependence with food, with the concept of health, with the production model, and in general, with the possibility of finding resources. The second element is the importance of migrant workers for functioning of the system. It is a central topic. The government came out with an intervention with the aim to protect migrants on the base of their functionality to ensure collection of products that would eventually be sold in supermarkets. The third element is the fragility of global and agro-industrial chains, but also the ability to take advantage of and profit from the moments of crisis from those who dominate the agribusiness. At while the fear, dominant industry has raised a fear that resulted in a rush to supermarkets and a total stop for farmers to access the markets. And this has resulted in a lot of profits in Italy for supermarkets, as well as an emphasis on the link between food and earth, and resulted in, the large retailers, large organized distribution has increased its sales in March by 23%. And in general, the so-called bioproducts increased sales by 19% through the same channels. And so this scenario is linked and reinforced the concept of just-in-time, which is like a nonsense in agro-industry. I'm sorry. So agro-industry is based on monoculture to the grow and distribution chain, and is, it is important to underline this power because it is linked to the marginalization of small workers, small markers, and the marginalization of women workers and migrant workers, especially those latter often live in precarious settlements without water or lights. And these are processes that exist here and where otherwhere. And the problem lays on differential inclusion of farmers and land workers. And it's important to see the processes of self-determination and struggle among land farmers in these months. It is important to underline the importance of the food self-determination, and which is linked to the reorganization of the agri-food system through the collective resource management. In Italy, in France, the centrality of food and access to food and resources has been tackled with various actions, mutualism. The first one, the most symbolically important and at the same time the simple one, it was to bring the shopping, the groceries, to those who needed them. This was the first action of solidarity spread throughout the national territory, and it served to break the isolation of people during lockdown phase, because we all couldn't and can't afford to live in the same way this emergency. The second was the organization of solidarity funds to those who were excluded from government measures. The third one has to do with general claims such as emergency income, unconditional emergency income, and amnesty for migrants who live in Italy. The fourth deals with creating solidarity network, also with agriculture and workers. Small rural society are always I'm sorry. No. I'm losing pieces. So, in general, reflections and discussions in these moments, and also previously to the pandemics, were very important because they underlined the essentiality, the importance of the farmers and land workers and agricultures and food system. Fuori Mercato, which is a national organization, and that was born from an occupied more slowly. Okay. Fuori Mercato, which is a national organization, land workers and other employees joining in a network, and it's based upon the exchange from the rural and urban areas, and change in mutualism. Also, not just upon food products, food topics. More national organization made by realities that shared a unique common political projects, anti-capitalistic political projects. And we started from the satisfying needs, fundamental needs, individual and collectives. And we had the aim, together with other subjectivities and other association, to promote and contribute to the build of a network in popular economy and like an alternative to the main market. And these characteristics like links us to other movements such as Via Campesina, which is one of the main expressions in these fields. When we talk about food and lands, and especially field of battle, we actually talk about the concept of food sovereignty, which centralize the right of the community, the local communities, to decide what, when, how, and for who product on the base of their self-determination. Sorry for the delay. I try to catch the phrases. Oh, yes, I'm speaking. Can you hear me now? Let me know when it can. Okay. Wait just a minute. No way. So, putting food in the center, to struggle for a key principle, and in sense, we mean the food sovereignty, and to put in the center the local communities that have the right to decide how and who has to produce what and for who on the base of their self-determination. At the same time, we do think that the resistance to the extractivist model steps with alternatives. This is for us the perspective of resistance against, so the conflict, and resistance for, and in this case, mutualism or conflictual mutualism. In these months, we have seen multiplication of efforts to practice and defend agroecology and construction of the agroecological alternative that passes from the need for defense of our territories and our communities. The social base, our social base is heterogeneous because such is the part of the society crushed by the laws of the market, which places the scenario with various modalities: workers, laborers, schoolgirls, students, precarious, and the condition like those pressing laws from the market. The answer to these basic needs and management for us today is to be questioned by claiming the social role of peasants and community builders, and engaging like conflicts is of main importance. Nowadays, the answers to primary and essential needs and the mainstream management has to be tackled, and we should support land workers and who has built communities against who has built society over profits, on profits. We want to experiment and reinforce solidarity link, care link among us that are essential for us to live in the society. Yeah, we have to reinforce these links and this solidarity linked to the care work and social reproduction to, in the society we live in.
Okay, thank you, Martina. We will now open for debate. We will finish at 6:30, 6:45 maximum. If you want to ask a question, you have to put in the chat your name, your country, your pronouns, and the language that you'll be speaking of in. Sorry, let me check. Okay. I can't go up in the chat, but if someone can write her info or. Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Elise, can you give us a brief introduction?
Hello, good afternoon. Here from Brazil. My name is Elise from Insurgência. I think the best way of beginning is to use a phrase, very well-known phrase here in Brazil, from a historic activist, Betinho. The pandemic, sorry, I missed the phrase. The pandemic has revealed the state of hunger in Brazil. The FAO says that until to the end of 2020, millions more people will be in poverty. Because they've lost their income, and income means access to food. In Brazil, 108 million people have lost their incomes in Brazil, or reduced their income, or they're unemployed. $12 million unemployed, 7 million of who lost their jobs this year. And without any kind of social security. The impact here in Brazil has taken the country back to a level of hunger we hadn't seen since 2014. And 14 million people are expected to be in extreme poverty by the end of the year. And the authoritarian fascist policies of the Bolsonaro government makes social inequalities more profound, deeper, and the super rich have continue to receive huge incomes while millions are plunged into poverty. But this is intensifying. It didn't begin now, but it's intensifying. It was an important moment in the history of Brazil. From that moment, austerity measures have been applied more rigorously, more health policy. For public health during the pandemic. Public health has saved the lives of many Brazilians. It's true that the process of growing didn't begin now, but the pandemic, together with the logic of Bolsonaro's government, various measures need to be taken in the short and medium term to deal with this emergency situation. What's in Brazil, an example of this is the first day of the Bolsonaro government in January 2019, that he eliminated the National Council of Food Sovereignty. So the Brazilian state has not been guaranteeing any policy in this area. They're not solving any problems in this area. In practice, what we've seen that the food parcels and solidarity policies, which have been the main ways of tackling hunger in the communities, the pandemic has diminished the mobilizations around this issue, and therefore has had a more graver impact on the population. Although in the medium and long term, the pandemic brings hunger, falling incomes, and we've made some contributions about this. But neoliberalism has made the distribution of foodstuffs worse in the context of capitalism. Women play a vital role in the production of food. They're a major part of the rural workforce, but they are the ones who have least access to care services, and they're And the logic is that it's the man who deals with the money and with trade in Brazil. This combines with the policies against hunger. We have 93,000 deaths from COVID-19. And this is because of the policies that benefit agribusiness. There's a policy of decimation against the Quilombola, escaped slave communities, black communities. And the proof of this, our Minister of the Environment was very clear in defending the relaxation of environmental controls and the reduction of protections for protected areas. The Bolsonaro government is increasing the deforestation. The forest fires are increasing again this year after what happened last year, when they also released restrictions on agrotoxic chemicals. The production of commodities, soya, wheat, millet, for export is deepening the role Brazil has had in the world economy since the colonial times. For example, produce good oranges, but the oranges produced with fewest chemicals are exported to Europe, and the ones that are left for the Brazilian consumers are the most contaminated oranges. So, while this is happening, so for example, when Vale, the mining company, had some dams that burst in Minas Gerais, and there's still not been any justice for these disasters. We buy manufactured products while we suffer the environmental consequences of that production. And the mining operations which almost effectively destroyed the Doce River. And similar things are happening across the global south. These companies essentially serve the global north. Our water is consumed to cultivate plants that then goes to the north. Yet we are short of water during the pandemic. People are short of water, hygiene, hand washing, and so forth. People who live on riverbanks are short of water, drinking water. People don't have access to their basic resources. Populations that are forced to migrate because of droughts. And this has a racist aspect, because the communities most affected by these phenomena are indigenous communities and black communities. as a result of agribusiness. Indigenous communities are being pushed off their land to ensure the profits of agro-exporting companies. In this context of deepening crisis, the struggle for agrarian reform is even more important to defend family agriculture, to defend family incomes, and because of the way the market is organized, we lose access to good quality local products, and yet we kill and we eat imported or low quality canned food. We have to use technical techniques and machines for agribusiness, and campesinos, peasant farmers who don't use that, are penalized. In the urban center, a very bad logic of transporting food over long distances, when we could generate income and foodstuffs more locally. The land, unused land near the cities could be used to produce food or to provide better housing for the homeless. So we have to reduce the distance which food is transported. These tasks are not. This needs a combination between different movements. In Latin America, we have to bring together the movements, strengthen these movements, struggle for land. Movements like the MST, for example, the landless movement. And to combine this with the struggles over climate change, against the use of plastics, to defend nature, to combine with the youth movements, so that climate changes should be at the center of our discussions, if they're not already. We have the World Assembly of Amazonia, which was first held a couple of weeks ago, with activists from all across Latin America to defend Amazonia. If we say that the far-right Bolsonaro government, which promotes neoliberalism and has been attacking nature, reducing the rights of forest peoples, we also have an important combination of movements, of indigenous movements who have been struggling and resisting for 500 years the genocidal policies against them. And this has to do with the questions in the urban centers as well. New forms of agroecological production, urban production of foodstuffs, the provision of drinking water, clean water. And this is And this is the perspective of a change of system against the crisis of civilization. We've been suffering attacks of many different kinds, and we're understanding the need for an eco-socialist response. And our role is to give voice to these marginalized communities, to raise levels of consciousness. And this has been happening through the movements. I think that's it.
Until 6:45 maximum. So again, if you want to talk and ask a question, you'll have to. Okay, can you hear me? Conseguem ouvir-me? So if you want to speak, you have to write in the chat your name, your country, your pronoun, and the language that you will be speaking. So if anyone wants to ask something about these concrete experiences, now is the time to do it. And I think that it's also open for the speakers. If you want to change experience or comment on something that the other person said, this is the moment to do it.
Hello, Andrea.
Hola.
Hello.
Can I add a little?
Yes, sure.
Okay. I heard from Irina about their experience in Elise, I'm sorry. Elise, experience in Brazil.
Que hablamos de la experiencia de Brasil.
Wait.
Sorry, it seems like the Castilian translation is on the main channel right now.
That's why.
A minute to fix it.
Okay. Just let me know when okay to start.
Can we try now?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, about just a little comment, maybe because I understood a bit that we have been experiencing a little similarity with the Brazilian comrades, specifically on the fascist regime here in the Philippines. So this regime of Duterte, as everyone are probably aware of, had actually brought everyone here into a division, a big division, and a disaster. So as we reached the cases of COVID into more than 100,000 right now, while our health workers are crying out for help at the same time, the ordinary citizens, 7 million workers lost their jobs, and farmers also unable to farm because of strict lockdown, because we are locking down senior citizens, the elderly, and mostly the farmers here are elderly, so they're not allowed to go out as well. Most of the people here are served with imported rice, and in fact, our partners are unable to sell their tons of produce from the previous cropping because they cannot compete with the local market, because only well-off people can afford organically produced rice, as it will cost a bit higher than the usual price in the market. So it's quite hard for us, especially in this kind of situation that we're in. I would also like to point out, under the terrorism law that I was talking about earlier, that since it defines terrorism in a very, very broad way, on top of that is a committee of appointed individuals by the president to identify organizations or even individuals that are part of or inciting or encouraging terrorism, according to their very own definition of it, is the biggest threat of the organizations here trying to push for the consciousness of the ordinary citizens. Because even then, owners can use it to seize farmers claiming lands for those who are disputing, or even they still have ongoing cases about their land. Politicians can stay in power as well through this terrorism law. So, I would also like to point out from under this pandemic, people starting to promote household-based gardening in both rural and urban areas. And now that they have more time to devote themselves to it, we only probably need to raise their consciousness more about it, more of its importance on food sovereignty, in order for it to be sustainable, to be more sustainable. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. We now have a question from Victor, and because we don't have a lot of time, maybe we'll end after the question. But Victor, if you want to start. Vitor Hugo.
Olá, estão me ouvindo?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Então, boa tarde, gente.
Good afternoon, people. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate our comrades, our comrade Elise, who made an important intervention description of the situation in Brazil in her. I think what I can say now, as you could see from her intervention, because of the disconnection between the workers in the countryside. We had the Amazonia Assembly. We can see the need for this debate because to connect with other countries. And in the COVID crisis has demonstrated the reality of this capitalist bourgeois state, has shown what life is like for workers, for indigenous peoples, and the reality that people face. So my question is, how can we bring together the question of food sovereignty? Here I am part of Levant.
Victor, 1 second.
Luis, are you translating from English then? Luis, from the last one you were doing it from the English channel.
Can you do that again?
Can you do that again?
No, that was Alex. I can't. It's a technical matter, but I can't do it.
Okay, Victor.
Oh, ok.
Continue.
Okay.
Então vou continuar.
So I will continue. So we have these various realities. The Amazonian Assembly, which just happened, was very important, which brings together the different Amazonias, which need to be brought together. And we need to characterize that Brazil is going through and the other countries in the global south. And we see the need to combine with each other, exchange information, and see how we can connect the question of food sovereignty and with eco-socialism across these different realities. In Norte, where I am, we've been combining with other organizations here to explain to people, to promote the buying of foodstuffs directly from small producers. And this is a form of struggle too. And that's the sense in which I wanted to contribute to this debate. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to thank everyone that was part of the debate. Martina, Jem, Elise, and Irina, thanks for bringing your experiences. We'll continue next weekend, but thanks for everyone who watched, and see you next weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.